So it says, and if you fear you might fail to give orphan women their due rights, if you were to marry them, then marry other women of your choice. This is talking about orphans. And obviously the issue with an orphan is that they don't have a family to defend them. So the point is everybody's supposed to have a family to defend them, right? With the modern collapse of society, is a major difficulty because people don't have family to be there and look after them and look after their interests. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then marry other women of your choice, 2, 3, or 4. But if you are afraid you will fail to maintain justice, then content yourselves with just one, all those bondwomen in your possession. This way you are less likely to commit injustice. So this verse is, among many other verses in the Quran, is very, very important to us because we in the West and now in the East as well, we have had a total different understanding of marriage and of gender. And this verse is really confusing and doesn't make any sense to us because we live in a Disney, Spielberg, Hollywood world, or at best we live in a like Western European world, right? So we look at things, for example, how maybe the Vikings used to look at stuff. We look at things perhaps how they do on Bollywood. We look at things perhaps how they would do in ancient Rome or ancient Greece, right? It's something like that. We do not read the Quran. We don't read the Seerah. We don't read the Hadith. So our values are not based on reality. Our values are based on something else. So it's kind of confusing. It's like, imagine if you were applying for a job and you just watch lots of TV, right? Or you're applying to be a policeman just from watching Hollywood, right? And so in Hollywood, this is what a policeman does. They do this, they do this, they do this, right? Even the rookie who is low down, he breaks the rules and wins the day, right? And saves the day. That's what he does. He has a hunch. He goes out and does something and solves the crime, right? It's all very exciting. When in reality, that's how you lose the job, right? That's how you're not going to get the job as a policeman, right? So things are warped, right? Things are warped. In Kickboxer, whatever it was called, was it Kickboxer? That was a film. Van, yeah, miss like, so if your life is like, yeah, right, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to practice kicking pillars and things like that. Like that's not reality, right? Half of a fight is just being tons of aerobic exercise, right? Somebody like I don't know. So it's all kind of it's all a bit ridiculous, right? It doesn't reflect the nature of humans, and nor does it reflect the nature of the deen, right? So it's actually very painful, right? It's very painful. Because you have a dream, you have a picture of something that's not actually reality, and then it just hits you in the face. So when we read the Bible, when we read the Quran, when we read the Seerah, we see that the nature of men is that they are what's it called? Polygenic or polygynous, right? Polygamy means you have more than one spouse. Polyandry means you have more than one husband. Polygyny means you have more than one wife, right? And so the nature of men is that they are polygynous, right? And that's a very important thing to understand. Whether or not they're actively polygynous, they are by like that by nature, right? One of my friends, he posted this once on Facebook. It's quite funny. He quoted Musaylim al-Kadhab. So Musaylim al-Kadhab, he was a fake prophet who claimed to be a prophet. So he said, when a man falls in love with a woman, all other women fall from his eye. When a man falls in love with a woman, all other women fall from his eye. Quote Musaylim al-Kadhab, right? Meaning he's a liar. The liar said that. That's not true. So what happens is, for example, there's many problems. Number one, for example, he's happily married, and he is happily married. And for example, now he's socializing with his sister-in-law or cousin or this, and everyone's thinking his wife is happily married and they have a happy marriage, and she's thinking, obviously my husband would never have any fitna from any other woman besides me, right? It's okay to go to a swimming pool. It's okay to go to the gym. It's okay to go to the beach because there's only one woman in his eyes, which is me. And then you realize that's not the case. Or you realize it's strange when somebody says that's haram, it's a fitna, you can't do that. The reason why people have to lower their gaze is because they do look at other people, right? That's the nature of people, right? And the nature of men is that they are ambitious and they are polygynous, right? That's a, and if you're going to ask some man, he says, oh, have you ever thought of polygamy? Or like they all think about polygamy, it's all they talk about. Right? Go to a bar, that's what men talk about. Go to a masjid, that's men talk about it. Same thing. It's the nature of men. So there's a problem when you have when you have a fight between yourself and nature, right? Um, there was this comedy film once where there was these people talking about they're making this joke how in the modern day we fight for rights that aren't real. Okay, so this was back in like 2000 years ago where people were like, we got to get rid of these bad rulers. They don't give us our rights. Like, yeah, they don't give us our religious rights. They don't do this and do that. And there was one person there. He's like, I want to have a right to change. I'm going to fight against the government for my right to have children. So like, what do you mean to have children? So yeah, I want to give birth to a child. So they were like, you're a man though. So yeah, but I should still have a right to give birth to a child. So then some people are saying, yeah, that's a good idea because you should have that right? Everybody should have the rights, right? The other was like, this is stupid. You don't have a problem with the government, you have a problem with nature. So you don't have a problem with government, you have a problem with nature. Like you can't give birth. You're a man for crying out loud. So this is where it's very painful for women when they are told a picture of a man that's not true. And then they get married or they're even thinking about marriage and they're like, it's what's it called? They get disillusioned because they had an idea of what a man is, and then that's not what men are. And so it's not fair to people. It's like telling people Santa Claus exists, but then he doesn't, right? That actually happened to my mom, right? It happened to my mom, grew up in a Catholic family, uh, Papa Noel, they call it in Switzerland, Father Christmas or Santa Claus. And it was like one day, it was like her little brother found out and said, look, in the attic, we found that was not, Santa Claus. That was daddy and he was dressed up and here's his beard and everything. She was like hurt, right? She was lied to, right? Muhammad Amin is nodding his head because he had a similar experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. The real experience.
Yeah.
Right. So you thought he existed and then you realize. Yeah. So it's a real thing. So actually it's called disillusioned, right? Disillusioned is now. So now that trauma continues into other things. I guess I shouldn't trust anything because if I was lied to about the most happy thing in my life and this really deep moral thing, and my mom described, it's a long thing. So the point is, being lied to about the nature of humans is wrong. Right? You being told your whole life that as a boy, one day you'll give birth and you don't. Or as a woman, one day something like, it's like, what are you talking about? It's not fair. Right? And so it's very important to understand men are polygynous. That is their nature. They might not be actively polygynous, right? But that is their very nature. So when a woman is trying, for example, it's very painful for a woman. She's like, what do I have to do? Like jealousy is a normal thing, right? What do I have to do to finally like get my husband to be totally mine, right? It's never going to be that case. It's never that way. And even in Jannah, what is the lowest level of paradise that they have? Two spouses. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's kind of like you're chasing after waterfalls, of the phrase, right? So even again emotionally, many men are not able to have more than one wife. That's true. In many situations, not possible. But again, on an emotional level, it's super important that you say, that is the nature of my husband, right? It is the nature of my husband. He's like that, right? So it's like you flick a cotton ball in front of the cat and said, don't touch it. And then the cat touches it. You're like, how can I train my cat to stop playing with cotton balls? It's a predator. It's supposed to chase things. That's what it's going to do. Every single time I go out in the backyard, the chickens run away. I want them to be more self-confident. They are prey. They are chickens. They are supposed to run away. In fact, if your chickens didn't run away from you, you'd be in trouble, right? So that is the nature of something. So when you have this fundamental fight between yourself and nature, right, it's not good. Another friend, I had a friend, he's half Italian, half Pakistani, right? So as many boys, when he's in his teenage years, he wanted to become muscular, right? He wanted to go to the gym and become strong. So once his PE teacher said, by the way, you are whatever ectomorph or whatever it is, like you're skinny. Like that's just how you are. I mean, you can do exercise, but you're never going to be buff. Like just deal with it. So he was frank with him and made it easy for him to not fight nature. So again, practical things are one thing. Whether your husband is actually going to get a second wife one day, whether that's ever going to happen, that's something else. Welcome to California. It's probably never going to happen, right? But it's still part of you, the nature of your relationship with your husband. The nature of your relationship with your husband is he is polygynous. He his mind is somewhere else because that's how his Allah has made him. And he wants to have children and he wants to have more children. And that's something that they would do, right? So this is this key concept, right? Al-malu wal-banun, Allah talks about. Men want to make money, men want to have children. That's just the nature of how people are. So if you're trying to fight it, it's not healthy for anybody. It's not healthy for anybody. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions marry two, marry three, marry four, right? And then also just shapes the relationship, right? It shapes the relationship. So the system that we are in now, let's say in the West and in developing countries as well, is that life is so expensive that men and women both have to work. Post-industrial revolution, we live in a world where men and women are not that different in the workplace. So it used to be men did hard labor, women cannot do hard labor, right? Again, even let's say look as an analogy, lions, right? Who does most hunting in the lion pack? The females. Who takes down the big prey? The male, right? The male, his mouth is big enough to actually suffocate an ox. What's it called? A buffalo. So he puts his whole mouth around the mouth. It's like that's insane. Like you see a cow's mouth. Imagine putting your whole mouth around it and suffocate it, right? So it's still needed for certain big things, right? There's certain physical things. We live in a world now where we could both be surgeons. We could both be IT guys. We could both be teachers. We could both be managers. It's not that different because the physicality is not that significant, right? And then life is so expensive that it's not that you cannot survive on a single income. So the problem is it just sounds very strange, right? That this system here, right? But we have to understand that that is not the default. This is socially engineered, right? This is social. But I'm sure if we gave the mic to Brother Salah ad-Din, he can talk about this whole things about social engineering and about economy and how they made things, etc. All these things. But this is the istithna. We live in an exception right now. That is not the default. The default is men work, women stay home, and then if you have 2, 3, 4 wives, how often are you home? Right? So again, one of these problems that we had, COVID, there was so much divorce because men were home too much. Right? It's not natural, again, because a man is a predator. A predator doesn't stay home the whole time. Right? So it's not natural and healthy to be home the whole time. Right? So again, I used to breed rabbits. And one of these things as you want to as a human being is you want the baby to be close to the mother. Rabbits intentionally stay away from their babies. In fact, it's very rare to ever see the mother feed the babies. It will look like the mum doesn't even care about the babies because she has a protective mechanism, which is she stays away from her babies so that if she gets killed, they don't get killed. That's a part of her rahmah. So we're trying to apply, right? So again, you're fighting nature, right? Why does my husband want to stay home? Why is he always going out? How can I get him to be mine and mine alone? That's not his nature. And so you will suffocate a man will be suffocated when he's continually home, right? Continually home, and he's suffocated in that way. So it's not a good way. It's not a good way of rearing your husband, right? Because he's not like that. A good way of rearing your husband, let's look at Yemeni culture. Yemeni culture, right? Men in one place, women in another place. Okay. I'm not saying Yemeni culture is fantastic. They're always on part for like 5 hours a day. Okay. And half people don't work. But men do men thing, women do women's thing, and the wife always chooses the man's second wife. So wife number one chooses wife number two, wife number two chooses wife number three, and he chooses wife number four. That's a clever thing to do. That's quite a clever thing to do. If you look at the wives of the Prophet, they actually had two groups, right? They're like two teams. That's a clever way to do it. Again, look at the lion pride. Who actually runs the lion pride? The women, right? So the men actually come in and out. What happens is that a man comes in, takes over the pride, kills off the cubs. Okay. He stays there for a bit, maybe 5 years. He's not that healthy anymore. Then what happens? A new man comes in, and so the people who stay are the mothers and sisters. It's actually a sorority. Sorority. It's a group of females. That is the actual lion pack, right? The lion pride, right? And so that makes a lot more sense. So the clever woman will be like, I'm thinking, I'm planning. She's managing in that way, as opposed to how can I turn my wolf into a rabbit, right? She's trying to turn, how can I turn him into a rabbit? And then she's not actually even happy, right? She's not even happy because you're fighting nature, just like somebody who is homosexual. Finally, I have my rights. I can now marry as a man, I can marry my boyfriend and I can live happily and can be accepted at work. Are you happy? No. Why? Because you're going against your fitrah, you're going against nature. That's not the nature of things, right? So somebody who is continually fighting things doesn't make sense. Somebody who's super old. How many times have we seen a super old lady? She's in her 70s, like super decked out, makeup and everything, and funny clothes like sister. Age, you know, age in a, what's the phrase? Age gracefully, right? You're fighting nature. You are not 16, right? You are not 16. Doesn't look nice. It doesn't look nice. Like, accept the nature of things, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Khaliq of al-Rijal and Nisa. He's the creator of the heavens and of the earth and of men and women. He knows our nature and he gives a system that works with our nature, right? And anybody who is reasonable and wants to be reasonable and wants to live a happy life will accept the nature of, the world and the nature of the deen. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put this system here. And then he says, but if you are afraid you will fail to maintain justice, then content yourselves with just one. So you feel that you're not going to be just because you have to be just. The Prophet ﷺ said, anybody who has two wives and is not just between them, he will come on Judgment Day with one side falling off. So his body will be punished for his injustice between the wives in this life by his body, one side of his body falling off, right? And so it's a huge oppression. But here's the caveat. Here's the point that we don't read, right? So, for example, even the fuqaha, they say, is polygamy sunnah or is it not polygamy? MashaAllah. Some of the youth at the back are really listening today. So they say, so the fuqaha, they say, is ta'addud, is polygamy sunnah or not, right? And then we're going to have people saying, so for example, the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis, they say it's not sunnah. It's sunnah to have one wife. It's not sunnah to have more than one wife. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. It says, all those bondswomen in your possession. So again, you live in a world which is post Ottoman Empire. You live in a post World War I, World War II world, post-colonial world, right? In a time where slave trade is no longer useful. So we've now morally banned it, even though it was super useful before. And you live in a world where you can no longer own a slave. You can't do that. In a world before that, you can own slaves, and people had to own slaves because you had no manual labor. So you own a farm and you have, right? You have a tractor that now does the work of 1,000 horses. So you used to have 1,000 horses, and you cannot possibly do all that work by yourself. So you used to anybody who had wealth and land had to have slaves. That was just a normal reality of the world. Slavery was a normal reality of the world. It existed since time immemorial, and it's existed for a long time. And male slaves are there for you to do your job for you. They might be involved in trade. They might be involved in politics even for you, like the Mamluks. That was a whole slaved class who were involved in politics, and they're there for work. And female slaves are effectively like a wife, right? So Hajar, radiallahu anha, the is not the wife of Sayyidina Ibrahim. She was the concubine of Sayyidina Ibrahim. There's a difference. So Sarah, radiallahu anha, gave Sayyidina Ibrahim her slave, which was Hajar. Here you go, here's a gift. Have a child with her. So that's called ownership, not marriage. So again, this is unbelievably important because if a man can own a woman and have a child with a woman, can a woman have a man and have can a woman own a man and have a children with her slave? No. Why? What's the difference? Because men are different to women. The relationship between men and women is totally different. So yes, a woman might own slaves, but she cannot have a relationship with her slaves. Whereas a man could own a woman and have her, for example, go and work in a school. For example, hey, you know math, go and teach in a school. He would take the salary, right? Or go and do manual labor, whatever it is. We can also have children with that slave because that is the nature of men. So what does that mean then? It means that there is a part of slavery that is found in marriage, right? There's a part of slavery that's found in marriage. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, marrying off your daughter is a form of slavery, a form of bondage. You should look very carefully who you're going to marry your child to. So this is a key thing. This is not two people in a Disney film that fell in love with nice music in the background and lived happily ever after. There is actually a relationship. There's a hierarchy. There's a level of control. And that is the nature of men and women, right? Control is part of that nature. We're going to see later on. I want to skip to it because it's important. Surat al-Rahman, Hurun maqsuratun fil khiyam. Allah is going to talk about beautiful wide-eyed maidens, maqsurat, who are limited, who are confined to places. So you would imagine that, hey, a nightclub was haram in the dunya because it leads to harm. Inshallah, and Jannah will be halal. Actually, that free mixing of men and women where everybody's seeing everybody, that won't exist in Jannah. Why? Because that's not the nature of men. If you're perverted, you don't mind people looking at your wife. If you're perverted, you don't mind being with a girl who's been with 100 other men at the same time. You don't mind. But by the fitrah, you want a monopoly over a woman. Ownership, control. So these are things when you're talking to a Western woman, like, I'm out of here, forget about this. Stop trying to control me. Stop trying to monopolize me. Stop trying to tell me what to do. She hates it because she's been trained and indoctrinated to not do that, right? Even you're going to find this in kids. Whenever the kid seems that they're being limited by their parents, like, I remember in the film, this happened. I remember in the cartoon, this happened. I remember this. I remember that. I keep being told, don't control me. Whereas that is the nature of men and women. That men seek to have control over women. Control, intimacy is the same thing. It's the same thing, right? قاصرات الطرف, that Allah describes now this is in paradisical woman, is she lowers her gaze, not that she sees everybody. She's قاصرات الطرف, she looks down. Her eyes don't fall on anybody else apart from him. Right? That is part of the paradisical woman, i.e., what your husband, sister, is looking for in you. So a woman who is a woman, the more accessible a woman is, the less her value is. So they label it as freedom. We label it as uninteresting, right? Uninteresting. Right? So the more accessible she is, i.e., the more out she is, the more apparent she is, the more people can see her, the more on stage she is, right? The less value she is. Right? That's the actual paradisical fitri way of looking at things. So again, these are huge things for people to swallow, because I was told, you should get education, you got to get out there, you have a body, you should use it on stage, that's a good thing, right? Like, that's not shameful. right? That's not shameful. That's like using your strength, right? Using your body or using your looks is like a power. That's a good thing for me as a woman. Like it shouldn't limit me, right? And whenever whoever's trying to limit you is bad. Whereas Allah's telling you, sister, that's totally off. You're devaluing yourself, right? You're devaluing yourself. The more you show off, the more you are exposed to people, right? The less value you have, right? In a hadith this week, that the Prophet ﷺ was asked, who is the best women? And Fatima responded, hadith this week, Allahu alam. She said, "Allati la tara wa la tura." Right? The best women are those who do not see men and are not seen by men. Right? So that sounds ridiculously restricting. Basically, you're telling me sit at home and don't be seen. Say, I mean, yes and no. Right? You are more value if you do that. You will be more valued. You will be more loved by your husband. You will be a happier person. It will be better for you. Now, is that very difficult? Yeah, it's difficult. But at least we can start to try and understand what on earth the Quran is talking about. Because in reality, this is not an issue of revelation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't even reveal this. This was something that was obvious. In the Jahiliyyah, right? The Jahiliyyah was a crazy time. There was no safety and there's no money. So many people survived on tribal raids. And what are they interested in? They're interested in money and women. So what they used to do before Islam is they used to have their wives take off their hijab, because they used to cover their heads, put her out on the street when the army was coming in, so that people would think she's just a slave. We don't need her. So the more exposed she was, the less she was going to be taken, because they're not going to go, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? So that if she's out and if she's out and visible, no one's going to be interested in her, because they were only interested in somebody who was, what's it called, khabi'a, right? That she's hidden away and precious. She's not hidden away and precious, right? Then we don't want her, right? If you can imagine, for example, someone's breaking into a house and you just throw some diamond ring out the window they're not going to look on the lawn for your stuff, are they? Someone's breaking in the house, they can look in the drawers. So you put your stuff out on the lawn, no one's gonna come take it, right? No one's gonna take it. So it's like that, right? This is the nature of people. Again, I'm not trying to say, okay, sister or brother, understand this now, but at least understand how insane we are, right? At least we can say, oh man, like the way I think of things or what I try and achieve in life actually doesn't make me happy. What I'm looking for doesn't make me happy, right? And so, so it's a key thing to put in our mind, right? So there's many things here. So here then, basically, again, so why is it off when somebody says, well, actually, the ulama, they disagree, is polygamy recommended or not? They don't mean polygamy as you mean polygamy, which is more than one wife. They all agree that a man by nature is polygynous, meaning he wants more than one female in his life. And all they're saying is, yeah, it would be better if you want to have more than one female in your life, that you should go and buy females as opposed to marry them, because then they don't have rights over you and you don't have to be just between them. So at the end of the day, like for example, Imam Shafi, who says it's sunnah not to have more than one wife, he had a wife and a concubine, so he has two women in his life, right? Right. Imam Ahmad, he had at least two wives, right? And so it's a perversion of the verse. When you take out slavery of a world that there was slavery, right? A world in which there was slavery, and take that out, suddenly we don't understand the verse, and suddenly we change the deen, right? And to be fair, there's a lot of abuses of this, right? Because the West has so many problems with Islam, we continually have to re-explain it and make sure it's okay with people, which is dangerous, right? It's dangerous because people come out of the masjid, they don't even know the basics of the deen. So if you go and ask somebody, hey, this guy, he owns 5,000 women and he slept with all of them, what do you think? He'd be like, oh, that's like super messed up. Right? He's like, that's almost kufr. Like, that's almost kufr, right? Because that's what we call ma'loom min ad-din bid-darura, something obviously known to people, But in our times of jahl, it's not obviously known. Like imagine if somebody said, somebody you're doing Quran and that you had no idea about the hijab. Or for example, you had no idea about praying 5 times a day. You just know about Jum'ah, right? And it's like, how can you not know about praying 5 times a day? It's because of widespread corruption and widespread, ignorance. So it's a key concept, right? And this is just the nature of how people are. And again, whether or not your husband is going to be actively involved in this, there are no slaves anymore. Polygamy is basically financially impossible in many places and arguably unadvisable. The point is, how do you look at your husband? How do you look at your husband? That is the nature of your husband is like that. That is the nature of a man, right? And it's just, it's just how things are. And so we shouldn't fight nature. We should embrace nature, right? We should look at ourselves, right? Basically, every Muslim is like this kid who was 15 and he doesn't look like other boys. All the other boys are tough and he's weak. And all the other boys are like violent and he's like scared. All the other boys are good at sports and he can't hardly catch a ball. And it hurts when he runs, right? And so he got told weird ideas that he should perhaps try and change gender. So then he's been thinking about this for a while and now he's convinced. And now he's turning the other way. He's like, no, that's not right. So every single Muslim is like that. We're basically gone to total 180 degrees from where we are. And now we're turning back and trying to get back to where we should be, right? We're not where we should be, but at least we're turning back to it like, oh yeah, I understand that those ways of thinking was wrong, right? Like I shouldn't change my gender, even though this, right? And so the same thing here for men and for women. Like this is the nature of your husband. This is the nature of men. And you have to embrace that, even though it's difficult. And the more you embrace it, the happier you will be as a couple, etc. Right? And another key thing here is you say, well, isn't that unfair, right? So here's a question. There's a bunch of men in front of me. So we said, what does polygamy mean? Having more than one spouse. What does polygyny mean? Having more than one wife. What does polyandry mean? Okay, so we said men are by nature what? Polygynous. Here's a question for the sisters. Are women by nature polyandrous? Okay, let's ask another way. When a woman gets married, do all men fall from her eye? No. If that were the case, I get married and then I introduce, hey, my wife, hey, meet my brother. Okay, it's fine, right? Because she only thinks about me. What did the Prophet say? Prophet said, your brother-in-law is death. He's the worst person to be around. Worst person to be around because you start comparing. You only see his nice side, right? You don't see his bad side because you're not married to him. And you start comparing, and then, oh, my car's whatever. Can you drop me off with the kid to the kids? Da, da, da. Oh, he's so nice, he's so friendly, so this, and things happen that shouldn't happen, right? Things happen that shouldn't happen, right? And this is a reality, and the whole family splits apart, right? So we have to be very careful that no, women are just like men. The Prophet referred to them as shaqa'iq al-rijal. They are just like men, and they are the full sisters of men, right? So the thoughts that go through your head, they go through their head, 100%. In fact, even more. There's a weak hadith, and I just mentioned that just in this passing, but that 10% of all lust was given to men. Okay, what about the other 90%? Given to women. So they think in the same way that you think. And in fact, if you think about the hormones, men are like this, women are like this. So sometimes it's down there, sometimes it's up here. So when you think, so someone's like, it's okay for it's like, so men have to be careful about what they watch on TV, but women, it's fine. Because men talk, women don't talk. So the hadith continues, the only difference is that Allah has covered their lust with haya. They don't talk in the same way, right? They don't talk in the same way, right? And just as and I don't mean to share haram things to for some, but it's just that jokes reflect reality, right? Jokes reflect reality. So this is an Afghan joke, okay, and it reflects a reality, okay, and it's a very horrible joke and it's a very dark joke, but it's a joke, okay. So this kid is asking his mum, and it's a little postcard, right, from Afghanistan in Farsi, and this kid is asking his mum and saying, hey, Mama, where'd you get that new necklace from? Did Daddy buy it for you? And she said, no, son. If I had to wait for him, you wouldn't be born, right? And so the one thing is, all women are bad and they're all trying to cheat on their husbands all the time. That's not true. The other is all women are angels, meaning they don't have any lust, meaning they don't see anything in anybody else apart from their husband, right? That's also wrong. But rather, there's something called ghaira or ghairat is in Farsi, right? Ghaira, which is jealousy. And there's something called fitra, is that if a woman sees a man or if a man sees a woman, it's the same process. And so that's why you would be careful. You're not going to say, oh, yeah, just have any person around your house. You're not going to let her talk to just any person. If you see things that are inappropriate, you guide things in the right direction in a nice way, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, we mentioned that, the verse of the Quran that about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the men to talk to the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam behind a parda. Why? Because it's purer for both, for their hearts and your hearts. So it's not just for the men that maybe a man would look at one of the wives of the Prophet in a certain way, but also the wives themselves, right? In that hadith, rifqan bil qawarir. Rifqan bil qawarir, in this hadith mentions there's a man who was pulling the camel that some of the wives of the Prophet were riding, and he was singing, right? Singing is what you do for the camel, so the camel can keep going, right? And in reality, they say many of the poetic meters in Arabic are based on the walk of the camel, because of that they used to do poetry for the camel. So anyway, he's singing, okay, he's singing, and the Prophet ﷺ tells them, hey, rifqan bil qawarir, be careful with the glassware. So one explanation is you're going too fast and they might get hurt because like women are like glass, so be careful. The other explanation is no, you have a beautiful voice. And when a woman hears a beautiful voice, things happen, right? Have you ever seen those? You've seen those images of footage of the Beatles with the women going like it's like women like seeing the Beatles. They're actually going hysterical, and the police have to actually like almost like passing out, right? So this is a real thing, right? So the music industry, like we say, oh, this women listening to music, like that's a real thing, right? Men listen to music, women listen to music, right? And and there's music that is targeted for women, but also a lot of these people are it's men. And it's like, so when you say, oh, no, so a woman should listen to music. What do you mean just listen to music? I'm not trying to say all women are trying to cheat on their husbands. No, but they're not all angels. That's not the nature of women either. That's not the nature of women either, right? So we have to understand that this thing about ghayrat, thing about being careful, thing about gender segregation, thing about no, dress like this, don't dress like this. It's real because we are real people, right? This is the nature of people. And so going back to the whole point, is it fair? Right? Is it fair? Well, let's ask another question. Is polygamy fair to men? So here's one guy who is a surgeon. He's in his early 30s, and alhamdulillah, his dad had money, so he didn't pay. He did his med school for free. He didn't pay anything. He's in his early 30s and he's a surgeon. Okay, and he's making $30,000 a month, and he has 3 wives. Here's somebody else who's working at Winco, and he has 0 wives. The guy from Winco talks to some girl and says, hey, would you like to marry me? You can marry me, but you're going to have to work at Winco too. And the two of us, inshallah, combined salary, 3.5, we'll get a small place. And she's like, actually, I'll marry that guy. And she became his wife number 4. So many women, for a real reason, they're like, this is so unfair. Like, why is it that a man could have more than one wife? Again, the nature. But it's also unfair to men because it means that there is a what's the word, capitalism on women, right? In that somebody who is good looking and well heeled, he's got money, he can marry more than one wife. Well, you can't even marry anybody. You see, that's so unfair. So yeah, that's true. Have you noticed that Allah doesn't give the same rights to a wealthy person than a poor person? A wealthy person can buy 5 houses. You can't buy any house. I called up just talking myself. It was fun. It was just funny. I called up Guidance Residential, right? They do Islamic financing. So they said, I want to buy my house here in Rose Garden. They said you can buy a third of your house, right? Like, go home, basically. That's the phrase we're using. Go home. Like, what are you doing? Like, you can buy a third of your house, right? So some wealthy people can buy 5 houses. A poor person can't buy anything. That's so unfair. Yes, that's the nature of the dunya. Sayyidina Abu Huraira, he was so poor he couldn't get married, and he wanted to get married for physical reasons. He said, Ya Rasulullah, can I cut my things off? Like, that's how difficult he was. Somebody else, 4 wives, right? That's the So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this dunya unfair and put people in different categories. Some people in a math class, 3 seconds they understand everything. In language arts, this. Did you put them in anything, they'll get straight A's. The other person's like, Subhanallah, right? This person, it's very hard for them to get anything. Some person, they can do any job, some can't do any job, can't do anything. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is called ar-Razaq. So it's like, that's so unfair. It's like, yeah, it's true, but it's unfair to all of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not divided up the rizq in the same way. So you're a woman, you don't have the same risk as a man. You're a wealthy person, you don't have the same risk as a poor person. You're intelligent, you're good looking, you're this, you're that, all these different things. This is called arzaq. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has divided things up, right? So have some comfort, sister. It's the same. Like, unless you're wealthy, and you might be wealthy, you might be ugly. You might be, I don't know, all sorts of issues. Like, nobody wants to marry you. So this wealthy, good-looking guy, he has 4 wives, and the other person has 0 wife. And everyone's like, that's so unfair. That's how Allah has divided up the risk. And now, why is that useful for women? Because imagine if every single man could only have 1 wife. So that means who can then all the poor women could only marry poor men. But now you have an option to marry the Muslim Elon Musk. Great. So it's actually useful for you. Because there's one guy who has 5 times, 6 times, 10 times the kind of wealth than everybody else. You can now marry him and you can eat, right? So another key thing to understand is because we are so decadent, because we're so wealthy, because we're so used to the lack of famine, and we don't really think about these things. But marriage for many people throughout whole of history was about eating. Like, my daughter has to get married so that she can eat tomorrow. That's how life was. Right? Because there's no food, right? Why did the Prophet ﷺ basically adopt Sayyidina Ali, right? Because his relatives, his uncle didn't have enough money, right? This is a common thing that people used to do. I was talking to this guy recently who was, so he's maybe 60, 70 now. He said that his dad, I think his dad and his uncle were given to an orphanage because the mum couldn't look after them. That was normal life. Like, I actually cannot feed you, right? So again, this is a useful thing. It's like, oh, I have a future. I can get married to somebody who has financial abilities, and I don't, and it's not just I have to. If there's only if the you know if 10% of the world is wealthy, more than 10% of the women can marry into can have stability. So it's a huge rahmah. All right, it's a huge rahmah. Go to Spain or go to Mexico. Every man is cheating on his wife. Right? So my friend is from Spain. He says, you go to Spain, you go to a funeral of a big family. He says, you turn up there and you see all of these women crying, like, and all these kids. They're like, what's happening? He's like, yeah, that's his wife and that's his mistress 1, mistress 2, mistress 3. It's like, that's the nature of things. Do you want to be cheated on, or do you want to be respected? It's like, your husband is not cheating on somebody, right? And so it's a rahmah. It's in reality a rahmah. But again, we have a fight between us and reality, right? Like, I used to tell my brothers, I said, when I'm older than you, I'm going to do this. rain check. You're never going to be older than your older brother, right? Inshallah, if you make it to Jannah, he's still going to be 2 years older than me, right? Right? There's nothing you can do about it, right? Like you have a problem with time, right? So these key things make your life easy. So help yourself out by getting by grasping reality. 2 feet on the ground. This is reality. This is how things are. Okay. Now I can start to become walking towards happiness as opposed to somebody who is continually fighting with reality and not becoming happy. Okay. So those are those things there. And we have to have put that in mind. And those are these issues that we talk about. So I'm going to skip again ahead to other issues. Inheritance. I did a whole class on inheritance. I'm going to talk about that another.
That the risk comes from the wife. If you marry a girl, then you just change.
Yeah,
Is that a saying?
that's true. That's true in a general sense. That's true in a general sense. So the question that Brother Zuhur asks is it true that risk comes from marriage? You say, yeah. So like when you get married, you have risk. When you have kids, you have risk. Every single time I had a kid, I got a new job.
Okay.
Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. When you give, you get more risk. But that's in a dini way. I'm just talking about the dunya, just the nature of the dunya. Like so somebody who's like, even if you're not Muslim, it would make sense to do this. Right? This is just a clever way to live life, right? Even subhanAllah, there's some women, business women, you don't have time to be a full-time wife. It's reality. You don't have time to be a full-time wife. So now you're like, right? Like why? If I'm flying to Chicago, Illinois, Tokyo, or everything else like, and now I'm like, I have a full, I don't have time to be a full-time wife. So why do you just become a part-time wife? Right? So that's a totally different thing. It's a totally different thing. Like, I don't even need a full-time husband, you know. I don't even want one. It's annoying. So, there's so many things where it actually makes sense just on a worldly level. I'm not the ukhrawi level is something else. Um, okay. That is going to go on to all sorts of things here. I'm going to skip this. Okay, so then number 34, it says, Al-Rijal Qawwamuna ala Nisa. Right, 134 of Surah Nisa. Men are caretakers of women. So this is a general thing. So what is this part of? Then this is part of patriarchy. Patriarchy meaning the society is built and draws its strength from the men. Right? That means your dad decides what you do. That means your granddad decides what you do. That means 34, yeah, verse 34. And so it's a very important thing. So this is so the whole issue between men and women is completely analogous between what we're seeing now with kids. So your son disappears for 3 weeks and comes back having had gender reassignment surgery, and he's now taking medication. And you're like, why was I not informed? Why did this happen? Why was I taken out of the picture? Where's my God-given right to help my child? Right? So that same paradigm is the same thing there. So they look at it as, why are you controlling your child? Why are you trying to limit the child's freedom? Why are you trying to make the child unhappy and not letting the child change their gender if they want to? Right? So for us, it's the same thing. We say the role of the man is not there to control the woman. The role of the man there is to protect the woman. So you are there to protect her. Okay, well, let's see what happens when you give women freedom and let them dress however they want and let them do whatever they want. Is that good for them or is that bad for them? It's bad for them, right? It's very bad, right? So, it's ridiculous. There should be more kind of like women speaking out about this, but to see the way the woman's body is used in the media, it's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. So it's like, oh, you suddenly have a good voice because you're a model. You're suddenly a musician because you're a model. What's that got to do with it? That means you were used as a body and to be shown in front of everybody. That's ridiculous. So the point is, men are there to look after women, not to control them. But you cannot look after somebody if you don't control them. So if I don't have the right to tell my son whether he can leave the house or not, then how can I look after him? right? Imagine, for example, he says, yeah, he calls the police on me, the cops on me, like, why? I want to go out and play. And he said, no. So if I can't tell my wife whether she can leave the house or not, how can I protect her? How can I protect her? Right? She says, I want to dress like this. And you say, no, no, you can't dress like that. You got to dress like this. Oh, you're limiting me. Get off my back. Right? And he stopped oppressing me. He's like, I'm doing it to protect you. Oh, you're just like overly jealous. Okay, let me be overly jealous, but that's my right because I'm doing it to protect you. Right? And so men are caretakers of women, as men have been provisioned by Allah over women and tasked with supporting them financially. Right? And so, key concept, women do not have to pay for anything. So when you say a woman has to do what her husband's told to, that doesn't mean that you can tell your wife to give me all your money, right? So many people do that, and that's totally wrong, right? Or nor can she can be so if she has the ability to work, she does not have to work. You don't have to do that. So let's say, for example, you're in a situation, right, where she could obviously work and she could make money, and you can't pay the bills, then she has one of three options. She can either say, I'll do it as sadaqah, not because I'm being browbeaten, not because I'm being forced, but as sadaqah. This is a good thing to do. Or B, uh, go to the court and say, my husband's not supporting me, and that's it. So she has that right. So that's where polygamy is going to come in. Your husband cannot okay, go and find a wealthy man and say, hey, I'd like to marry you. So it's a rahmah for her. So I don't want to work. She worked what she realized, I don't want to work. I really do not want to work. Okay, go and find a wealthy man and say, listen, I will be your second wife. And you'd be like, okay. So you're happy, everyone's happy. Polygamy is haram now in most places, right? I mean, nobody accepts it. It's not accepted in the Muslim world, it's not accepted in the West. And then she's in a situation where she's been told, well, you have a degree, I don't have a degree, you're a doctor, I'm not a doctor, you better work, etc. And she doesn't feel that's not her fitrah to be out and working. Doesn't help her, right? So a woman is a wave. A man is a straight line. So when you say 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, a woman doesn't work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. She doesn't work like that. That's not the nature of her body, right? She's not the same person on every week of the month, whereas you are basically the same person. You might be different in the morning, in the afternoon, but you're not a different person, different every week of the month. Whereas for a woman, so it's not part of her fitrah. It's actually abuse to her, right? To ask her to do 9 to 5. So she's commuting at 5 a.m. You're commuting at 5 a.m. It's not the same. Women are not supposed to do that. So anyway, they are not obliged to pay for anything. If the woman is a millionaire and he's got no money, that's irrelevant, right? It's irrelevant. And so this is a key freedom for women is my money. If I earn money, I want to spend it on the kids or I want to spend it on the house, that's fine. That's called sadaqah. Otherwise, don't talk to me and don't make it awkward and don't make expectations kind of implicit, etc. Right? That's very low. And subhanAllah, some people, my friend told me, he said he was married and then he proposes to a female doctor as a second wife, and she's like where are you? Well, basically, I'm making 30K, you're making 6, right? You have a wife already, and you basically want me to pay for everything, and just like it doesn't make any sense, right? Because that's not the nature of the men and female, right? Like I remember someone because I was so technologically backward. When I first came to America, I saw a woman paying with her phone. I didn't realize she's using her husband's card. But so a husband and wife had coffee or whatever it was, and she went and paid. And I was like, I told my wife, so the day that you pay for my coffee, that's it. Like just the nature of things is that women pay, right? A bunch of kuffar. A guy goes for a drink with a girl. Who pays? The girl? That's not the nature of things. The guy pays, right? That's the nature of people, right? He's not doing a very good job if he's going to get her to pay. That doesn't make any sense, right? So the nature of people is that men pay, right? And that this is the haq that a woman has, and then she has a lot of stresses. She has physical stresses, emotional stresses. Take that whole stress off me. I don't need to worry about bills. I don't have to worry about anything, right? So key thing to have in mind, right? So then it says, and righteous women are devoutly obedient. So when it comes to obeying your husband, there are this ikhtilaf among the ulama exactly what that means. Just like this ikhtilaf when it comes to obeying your parents. So do I have to do every single thing my dad tells me to do? Like it says, raise my hand if I put it down, etc. How does this work? So we have kind of two extremes, and then something in the middle. So the position of the Shafi'iyya is that obedience means leaving the house and intercourse. That's what it means. She's not obliged to do anything else. She's not obliged to cook. He says, can you make me a cup of tea? And she's like, no, totally fine. She does not have to make him a cup of tea. She's like, oh, I have guests coming. Oh, that's nice. Like, could you just tidy up? It's like, no, I'm not going to tidy up. So she doesn't have to do anything. The marriage contract did not make her a slave to do anything. Her job, she doesn't even have to do anything with the baby. She just has to give birth and give the initial milk, which is that first 2 days, 2 days, right? A certain milk that comes at that time. She does not have to breastfeed. She does not have to change diapers. She doesn't have to wake up 5 times. All she has to do is, he says, don't leave the house. She doesn't leave the house. And she has to be sexually available. That's all she has to do, right? The other side, then we have the Hanafis. The Hanafis, they say, anything that is not demeaning and harmful, so it's not ihana, there's no ihana in it. So he says, slap yourself in the face and say, I'm an idiot. Does she have to do it? No. Right? She doesn't have to do that. Right? You shouldn't have to do that. Or that's harmful to her. Right? So here is a very key thing, speaking to the whole world, but particularly Indo-Pak and particularly, Arabs to less extent, but it's a major thing, right? Many people treat their wives as slaves. In fact, worse than slaves, right? So I remember, for example, being with the Bengali family, and in Bengali family, so the brother he's the oldest son, and he lives with his wife. And because he's the oldest son, he lives with his parents. So then his wife serves him and the parents and the children and his little brother and his other little brother. So like, your wife cleans your little brother's underwear. Yes. Right? And she's about to commit suicide because she's on child number 10 and she's looking after, and she has to deal with the whole thing, mother-in-law, the whole time. And that's just okay. And that's accepted, right? So here, let's compare it to slaves. The Prophet said, with our slaves, don't ask them to do what they can't do. And if you do ask them to do what you can't do, help them. That's a slave. She's not your slave, right? She is not your slave, right? So this is a cultural abuse that we see. It's like clear and obvious abuse on multiple levels. And so that's just totally wrong, right? If I want to help your out of respect, help your mother, etc. But who should be serving your mother? You should. You should be serving your mother, right? So yes, out of respect for you, I will do it when I can. And mashallah, I heard there was a sister recently, she got divorced, but she said, like, they're still my in-laws, for crying out loud. So she went and flew to the other country. Are you okay? Like, we've been in this marriage like 30 years or something like that. So it's like, these are my in-laws. Are you okay? You went to go look after his, the husband who divorced her, still looking after them. I don't really care, right? But that's from her, not that she was culturally or expected to do these things, right? And so these are wrong. So when you say yes in the Hanafi school, like I asked you to make a cup of tea. So here's the difference. In the Shafi school, go make a cup of tea. I'm available. I didn't ask if you were available. I said, can you make me a cup of tea? She's like, I'm available. She's there doing her nails. Like, are you available? Right? I go make a cup of tea. And she's like, you can do it yourself. Right? Whereas for the Hanafis, no, she does actually, it's like haram for her not to do that. Like, I'm asking you to make a cup of tea. Please make a cup of tea. And she's like, no, sue me. Right? That's actually haram. Right? You're doing something haram because they're devoutly obedient. Now, the Malikis, which you often find them, they're in the middle. They say whatever is urf, whatever is normal. So he cannot ask her to do things that are not normal. So therefore, it would change with place and time. Is she in California? Is she in Bangladesh? Is she in, I don't know, Guatemala? Is she in England? Whatever is urf and aada, that those normal things are there, right? But at the end of the day, there is a concept of obedience. There is a concept of hierarchy. They are not equivalent, nor are they equal. They're not equivalent, nor are they equal, right? So that's a key thing to understand, right? So, and righteous women are devoutly obedient and when alone, protective of what Allah has entrusted with them. So then you say, she trusts, looks after herself, etc. So here's the problem. My wife is very conservative. She stays home and just watches TV. What is she looking at? Oh, nothing, just TV. It's like, if you watch TV, what do you see on TV? What's she going to see on TV? So this is a huge concept problem, is that what do we do is label men. Men are all like super interested in those kind of things. Women aren't. So therefore women can look at anything they want and it's fine. And I'm not talking about like real haram stuff. I'm talking about normal TV. Normal TV is super haram. Normal TV, watch a soap opera. It's like, this is what you're going to see. Good looking man, good looking woman. That's what you're going to see. An action film. So you saw one or two women in the action film. She saw the man the whole time, right? You can't expect a normal woman not to be attracted to that, right? So like there's a reason. So a James Bond film. So in the James Bond film, like, who's the new Bond girl? Okay, there's a woman. She doesn't come up that much though. But the whole time there is a handsome, heroic man who saves the day, right? So for a man, it's cool action, the Bond girl that comes on now and then. But for a woman, it's like the whole time it's a fitna. The whole time it's a fitna, right? So the key thing. So again, I'm not saying all women are trying to cheat on the husband. I'm not trying to say that. Nor am I trying to say they're angels. But they're in the middle, there's a fitna that's like any man, any woman who looks at a man like that, ideas will come to their head. That's just the nature of women. So they're protective of what Allah has entrusted with them. Okay, so I'm going to go to 35 because it's important. And you're lucky guys on YouTube. This is stopping here. I'm going to pause the recording so I don't get fired or imprisoned.